Seems legit.
Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. Today we are making what I have called Driggle-Draggle. So that that phrase means an untidy woman. So I thought that this was quite appropriate because I have made this as a travel tote for all of your toiletries so that you can be more organized. So it is a really quick make, as you can tell by the size of the video. The only hardware you actually need is one of these little dongles, which of course you can skip and just put a knot if you would prefer to. It just won't stay closed that way. And you need some elastic. And apart from that, it's just normal bag making supplies. Now, because this is a toiletry bag, I did use waterproof canvas for the inside. And this is like a board short fabric on the outside, just because I could. So the idea of this is that when you fill it in all the little spots, you then pull the drawstring, tighten it up, and then you can just carry all of your toiletries nice and quick with you to the toilets or whatever. I also like to put a knot in this end. I didn't do that in the video, obviously, because I'm doing it now at the start, which is the end for me. And then that way you can just kind of hang it on the shower or whatever and then hold everything. So the other cool thing about this style is when you've got all the stuff in, you can actually fold down the sides a little bit so that you can kind of access it easier. Or if you fold it all the way down to where the, what's it called? The elastic and the pockets are, things will actually pop out the top so that you can easily grab them, put everything back in, fold it up, and then just do it up and off you go. So if you would like to see how to make this, please stay tuned. Alrighty, so I have my drawstring cord, which just happens to be this cool like unicorn rainbow stuff. You will need your cord stopper, I guess, elastic. I use pre-made polyester binding. It's really good for this particular project because it is water resistant to waterproof. So because this is going to potentially get wet and messy, this won't rot like a cotton would. And then I've cut out all my pieces. I've already put my interfacing on the circle. So it's really important to put iron or stitch, you can stitch it, your interfacing circle on the bottom because that will help us when for our final construction. And because I'm using waterproof canvas, there is no interfacing. So even though I wrote the pattern, we're probably still not going to do it the same way the pattern says. So I'm going to start with my binding and my mesh pocket. You can exchange the mesh for a fabric. That is not a big deal. Mesh just means you can see through it. But if you don't have access to mesh where you live or you just don't like mesh, that's also fine. So I'm just going to fold it in half and I'm going to stick with the same stitch length for everything. So I'm going to be on 2.5 today. I'm not going to need to alter it in pretty much any way at all. So I'm going to fold the binding over in half and then I'm going to top stitch 1/8 of an inch from this inner edge. You also want to try not to stretch your mesh too much. This is like a stretchy mesh. I usually always stretch it at least a little bit. It's not intentional, it's just kind of how it works out. But it just means I can cut it down at the end. And we're going to back stitch at both ends. Throw that down there. Trim off the binding. I can put that away till the end. So we've now got our mesh pocket. The mesh pocket should be the same size as so there's small and large pieces of this. So the small one and the mesh pocket line up. So I'm just going to grab some wonder clips and clip it on. You don't have to clip it, but I tend to stretch it. Again, it's not intentional, but it does happen. So by clipping it, I am less likely to stretch it while I'm trying to stitch it down. So I'm going to start here, and within the seam allowance, I'm going to do 1/4 inch from the edge. You can also do 1/8 of an inch, basically anywhere up to half. But by staying away from close to the edge of the seam allowance, it guarantees that you won't see it. And needle down, pivot, and back stitch just to lock it in. and then trim off those tails. I'm going to move all of this to here. I think it's going to help my claws with my space. So you can just leave it as one big pocket, but it's going to kind of gape a little bit. So I like to fold it in half and make a little snip, and then I'm going to stitch up the center. So when doing this, always start from bottom to top. You could also do thirds. If you were more likely to put like makeup brushes and stuff, you could make smaller panels to hold them better. It just depends on what you're going to use it for, really. I designed this for those that go camping and stuff. I want to take all their toiletries and just have it as a simple grab and go bag. So that's where my brain went with this pattern. So that is now done, and we've now got 2 pockets, 1 and 2, which are even. Again, you can put that line anywhere depending on what you want to put in it. You could map it out first, but half is easy if you just don't really know where you're going with it. So I'm going to fold this in half, and we're going to put a mark at the halfway point. And then we're going to take this and make sure that if it's printed, make sure it's up the right way, because that's important. And then I need a ruler. So I'm going to take my ruler. And I'm going to rule a line. So that is the guide for where this is going to sit up against. So we'll sit it on the line and then above it. Like that. Then I'm going to find halfway, because we're going to need that. We'll need it later anyway, so it's easier to do it now. Only on the bottom, we don't need the center of the top, so that's fine. So one of our lines that we're doing is actually going to be in the center. And then the pattern has the measurements for your other lines. So I'm going to do one there. And yeah, that's right. One there. I had to write these down because I don't remember them off the top of my head. So I've got it just off to my left. So the first thing I'm going to do to make this as easy as possible for me is I'm going to line up my center point with that center. So it's along the line and then above it. And I'm going to stitch forward and back and forward again. I want to really like reinforce that so it doesn't come undone. So forward, back, and forward again. That has locked that onto there. Then I'm going to grab the end. You can also just work left to right. It doesn't actually matter. But I found that this is probably easier, especially if you wanted to change the positions of the elastic. Like if you've got specific bottles that you take everywhere and you want them to perfectly fit in, you could literally lay it on, push it against it, and then adjust it like that. I'm not here to tell you what you can and can't do. This is just like a generic kind of spacing that I worked out. And you'll also notice that they are not perfectly even. That was a deliberate decision because not all your bottles are the same size. So in the bigger ones, you'd put like your shampoos and stuff, and then the smaller ones are designed to hold hand creams and sunscreens and stuff like that. So now I just need to, now if you wanted to, you could just go halfway and put it down like that, and you could have them all even, but that's not what I'm doing. Again, for the reason I just explained. Was it there? There, like that. And then from this edge, work it out to there. So there's my mark. And now I'm just going to line up this mark with the mark on here. Now I know you guys can't see it because it's very, very pale, but that's because I used chalk pen. I can see it fine. And I'm making sure I'm not rubbing out the vertical line to make sure that they're all lined up evenly. And of course we are trimming all the tails as we go, so I don't have to do it later. This would be great for market stalls too. So if you guys are doing markets and you want some like lower value items, because I like to hit, you know, a bunch of price points when I was doing markets. These are a great option because you can production sew these and they are pretty quick. I mean, I'm chatting a lot and explaining, but if you cut out a bunch of these and you do them in thread color bundles, you could smash them out pretty quickly. So there's now our elastic loops. I am going to just use my finger and rub off the chalk line that I drew because we don't need that anymore. And then I'm going to take my original outside piece. I'm also going to push that elastic over and we're going to line up this edge. And we're using 1/2 inch seam allowance. Alright. It is important to use the correct seam allowance for this, as it's a circle and I work out all the maths so you don't have to. When I say me, I mean me and a calculator. Okay, so now we're going to do the other side again with the 1/2 inch. If you wanted to do a smaller seam allowance, you would just have to take it off these pieces. I did think about doing a 3/8 seam allowance because I do like that size, but it works out trickier, so I didn't want to. Right, so turn this one right sides out, and that is now the inside of our bag. See, we're already like halfway there. I'm going to take this piece, which is the casing for the cord, and I'm just going to fold it over 1/2 inch and then over again and top stitch along there. You can be pretty generic with this. I'm obviously not measuring it, I'm just folding it. I also have a pretty good knack at folding a 1/4 inch because I've done it so many times. But if you just want to eyeball it, that's also okay. It will always fit with how I've designed the pattern. So you don't have to measure that with a ruler. You can just kind of do about 1/4 inch. That one's quite flexible. So I need my cord. Now it's easy to do the cord this way, so you don't have to thread it through later. But if you're finding that you're struggling with it, you don't have to put the cord in. But I'm just going to fold this over so that the wrong sides are together and clip it down and have the cord poking out. Now the reason for that is now I won't have to thread it through later. But if you're finding it's too tricky, do it later and thread it through at the very end. There's nothing wrong with that plan. This just saves you the step of having to thread it, and I kind of like that. You also don't even have to clip it. I will stop clipping. You can just kind of hold it and do it as you go. But the clipping does make this process quicker. So again, I'm just going to do like 1/8 inch from the edge. You could go all the way up to 1/4. But we're just, oh, see that? I just pulled it. I just pulled it down. That was my bad. So that's one thing you don't want to do, is pull on the cord, because then it unthreads itself, which is counterproductive of what I was trying to make it do. I don't know if I can grab that now. I'm going to take my pokey stick and see if I can poke it back out. It might work, it might not. It's here. I'm just trying to work it out. Now obviously this is not as quick, but that's because I pulled on the cord. That was silly of me. A mistake I am now paying for. I will deal with it in a minute. So again, we don't pull on the cord. And then we backstitch. Alright. Now, I've made it way worse. So we'll do it at the end. I pulled on it, so that was my bad. Another thing I could have done is clipped it to the top, which would have been smart. But too late now. Luckily, this is a flute cleaner, so long as I can get that into there, I can do it this way. See, my turny stick is good for so many things. Yeah, almost. Let's try that for like a third time. Third time's the charm, right? So because it's a flute cleaner, it's got the hole in the top. There we go. Don't let the other end out. And then I'm also going to, wherever I put it, put the cord thing on the end. If you don't have a cord thing, you can tie it. I like my cord thing. I'm very unorganized today, if you can't half tell. But that's all right. So, hold both the ends together, push the cord stopper. I don't really know what they're called. I know I should because I purchased them, but I don't remember. And then we're just going to push the cording through. Now one side will always come easier than the other. It's just the way that it is. I've also melted these ends, so they've actually got a hard stopper bit on the end. So I'm hoping that that's going to help me to push it through. Gives it something solid to work with. So I just used my snips to shove it through. And so now that can't come undone, so I'm not worried about it. Take our exterior. Now, if you've got a bag tag, now's the time to put it on. I will be using my laser cut ones because they're fabulous. And so you want to find the center, because we always find the center. And I like to put mine 5 inches up from the bottom. Now, you don't have to put it there. You can put it wherever you like. But I've picked 5 inches because I think it looks nice there. Like that. So 5 inches is the middle of the tag. So now I'm just going to stitch, back stitch, and sew all around the edge. My tail just got tangled, so I'm going to untangle it now, like that. Needle down, pivot, and up and back stitch. So now my tag is attached, and it's a little bit of a feature point on the front. So if you weren't doing this, you could instead do a cool embroidery and make that the front of the bag. So we're going to fold this in half and then stitch with a 1/2 inch seam allowance down the side. Like so. And then we're going to find the halfway point of this. So just fold it in half like that. And I'm going to put a clip there. So this part here will line up with the top of the bag at this seam here, so that the seam will be at the back of the bag and you won't see it. So I'm just going to put raw edge facing up and clip it in place. And then I'm just going to work my way from there around towards the front. Now there is a deliberate gap in this at the front, a bit like my minx pattern. So we've left a gap to make it easier for the drawstring to work. If it goes all the way around, it might be a bit too tight. And the gap should be right above where your bag tag is, like that. So now that we've got those 2 layers, I'm going to take my 3rd layer, which is this one. Now this one, it doesn't matter where you put the seam. You can match the side seam, but if you're worried about bulk, just put it anywhere, because the inside of this is pretty, you can do whatever you want. So we're just going to slot it in like so, making sure that your print is facing up. And then I'm just going to add it into the clips. Work my way around like so, and you will have extra seams on this piece, so just keep that in mind. If you want to add some extra clips, do that. There we go. So they should perfectly fit if you have cut it correctly and done the proper 1/2-inch seam. Okay, so I'm going to slot this under here, and I'm going to do a 3/8 of an inch. You can also do a 1/2-inch seam. This will just change how tall the bag is. I'm also keeping my fingers in front to make sure I'm not stitching on that cord on the inside of the bag, because if you stitch that, then it's not going to work. So we're just bringing it around because it is a circle. And then I'm just going to trim off those tails right there. And then through the whole bottom, because we don't have a base on, I'm going to turn it out the right way. And then I'm going to push the exterior to the inside, so the lining is facing outwards. And I'm just giving it a nice tug, like so. Then, like this, I'm going to, not at the front, at the back where the seam is, I'm going to make sure that all the layers are down, and I'm going to top stitch 1/8 of an inch from where the seam is at the top here. You can do a 1/4 of an inch if you're new to sewing and you're worried that you can't. In fact, I'll do a 1/4 of an inch to show you that it doesn't make a difference. Which for me is just the edge of my foot. So we're doing little bits at a time and then bringing it around. And we just keep on bringing it around. Like so. And then when we get back to the start, we're just going to back stitch. And then trim off those tails. And so now, 1/4 inch doesn't even matter. You can't really tell much of a difference. It is a bit easier to sew for those that are beginners. But the pattern does state 1/8 of an inch. You can just do whatever. Alright. So now, I need my other, there it is, it's on this side of me. So I'm going to take my exterior and my lining and put them together. If you want to make the pattern match, you can, but it won't really matter. You'll never see both of them at the same time. So I'm just going to put some clips around like that. And I'm going to top stitch at 1/8 of an inch and join the 2 pieces together so that they become one piece. As long as it's within the width seam allowance, it doesn't even matter how crooked it is, because we're not going to see this. This is just a holding point for in a minute. So we're going to take it, we're going to fold it in half, and then I'm going to just make a little snip at the halfway points within my seam allowance, and then I'm going to join those 2 clip points together in the opposite direction and do here and here. So now we've got 4 points. Don't worry that it's a bit crooked, we can iron it later. Alright. What is going on here? Oh, I see what's happened. Right, so I've made a mistake. See how this doesn't seem to match up, and I was wondering why? This wasn't folded completely down when I top stitched. Don't know how I managed that. So I am just going to unpick it. Where do I want to go from? I want to go from here. So my top stitching, I didn't pull it down. Remember when I was tugging at it? I clearly didn't pull it enough because I wasn't concentrating. I'm just looking for my stiletto. So I've made one snip and now I'm just going to pull the thread out with the stiletto. I find this the quickest way for me to unpick something. I love my stiletto. I broke the other end already. It officially died. Haven't even had it that long either, so that's a bit disappointing, but anyway. Alright, so here's where my back stitching is. So I'm just probably going to have to make a few more snips than normal through the back stitching. But we do need to pull it out. Like that. And you can also snip that one. There we go, got it out. And then I'm just going to continue pulling out the stitches. This went from a quick project to not so quick, but that was my fault for rushing. And I want to unstitch all the way to here. So I've basically done most of it wrong. It's just caught a little bit of a lip, which only matters because A, I want it to look pretty, and B, the bottom's not measuring up. And if I could cut this down to match, but then the bag would be wonky, and we don't want that either. So I'm just going to unpull it. When this tail gets too long and annoys me, I cut it off, because it's quicker to have a small tail to pull through. As you can see. And I could have edited this out so that you didn't see it, but that's not a very good learning experience. You don't learn anything if I don't show you. So it's not very much that it folded over, but it's enough that it will make a difference to the bag. See how it's getting a bit long again? So I'm going to just snip that tail off and go again. As it gets too long, it becomes harder to pull them out. Like that. They start to do crazy things like fraying. So you just keep them short and it comes undone nice and easy. Right, so that's that done. So now that I've unpicked the problem areas, I am now going to tug on this, and to make sure that it's not going to do it again, I can actually come and clip the bottom together, because that will help hold it in place. Like this. We're going to have to clip this in a minute anyway to stitch it, so we can just do it now instead. Clip. Move that one to there. Right, so the bottom is now clipped together, so I can now come back knowing that they're even and just go back and top stitch. back stitch and trim your tails. Right, so now that this is already joined together with the clips, I'm just going to stitch around the edge to hold it together as a solid single piece. Again, we need to move it around, getting rid of the clips out of my way as I go. And back to the start and back stitch out of habit. So that's just going to hold it together as one bit now. So, the front. Here's my front here. So I'm going to make a snip. Then I'm going to pull this tight, I don't know, and clip there. And then we're going to do the same thing. So I'm going to match up those two clip marks and then come out to the side. And this is just getting us 4 even points. And so now these 4 points that I've just made here match up with the 4 points on the bag here. So pick one. It's a circle, so you know, should be right. Line that up, and I'm gonna make the clips face the base piece for a start. I'm gonna put 3 clips on there. Then I'm gonna come in here and grab the opposite side, line up those clips, and I'm gonna put 3 clips. 1 lets it swivel around too much. 3 is just much better. Then I'm gonna grab this side and line these points up. And you will start to notice that you're going to get these little kind of bubbles happening in the circle. That is perfectly normal because we're trying to fit a larger circle into a smaller space. So the stabilizer in here acts as a shield so that where we're stitching won't have issues. So I'm just going to put another clip and another clip. And then you should just be able to grab the edge of this and push down, and the stabilizer will keep it as a perfect circle, and you can just add clips to hold it all in place, like so. Then we come to this little section here, do the same thing. So I'm going to push it down and then clip it together. So the stabilizer is the actual circle size, and so these bits out here are bubbling a little bit. You can see it's not perfectly flat, but down at the bottom of the clips where the base actually is flat, which is normal. So like, oops, I moved it. So if I hold that like that, see where my fingers are, how it's doing a bit of bubbles? If I actually go along the edge there, where the base is, it's not bubbling. I know that's a lot of clips, but if you look at it, I don't know if you'll be able to see this, but if you look in there, the base has no kind of bubbling happening. See right down the bottom? It's all perfectly smooth because the stabilizer is helping to keep our perfect circle shape. So now I'm just going to come in here and I'm going to stitch and I'm going to back stitch, and then turning this like this as a circle that it is and keeping it up as a 3D object. We're just going to stitch around the whole base. Like that. And then trim off all those tails. And then you just want to come back and check and make sure that there's no like pinches or tucks or anything happening on that side. If you are satisfied, we're going to take our binding, and you can start anywhere, and we're just going to fold it over in half and clip it down. And again, I want my clips to face into the center. If you have a cylinder arm machine, or you raise your machine up. You could in fact do them the other way. So this is going to cover up our raw edges and then finish off the bag. Doing binding this way in this particular style bag also gives it stability, so that the base is more solid, which is good if you're filling it full of stuff. And it may not seem very large, but you can fit a lot of toiletries in here. You can also make your own binding if I wanted. I could have made it out of the waterproof canvas, and so it would have all just blended in and not be seen. But I do find this easier. Alright, then when we get back to the start, we're just going to overlap it a little bit. And before I go any further, I'm going to grab my cigarette lighter and just singe along there to make sure it's nice and melted. And then it overlaps one clip. One clip's worth. So I want to start at that join. Now I'm going to stitch closest to this inner edge of my binding. I'm going to do about 1/8 of an inch, but you can kind of eyeball that as you see fit. And I'm using this finger here, and I'm pushing, you can't really see, but I'm pushing against the binding right next to the foot to make sure that it's not trying to slip out as I go, because it will have a habit of doing that. So I'm just doing up to a clip and then I stop. I always want to stop with my needle down so that nothing moves. And then I'm just going to keep bringing this slowly around. And again, I'm pushing it next to, so I'm not worried that I'm going to get my finger because I'm touching the edge of my foot. But sometimes pulling the clip off will actually drag the binding out a little bit. So by doing it this way, I'm ensuring that it's staying where I'm telling it to and not where it wants to go. So then after we've done that, you want to flip it so that we're looking at this side and make sure that you got everywhere. You want to make sure that it's attached on both sides, which we're good. The finger pushing really helps. And then we just turn it inside out. So I'm going to grab this kind of, not edge, but part, and then I'm just going to pull the base through. And then I always stand up to do this, on or off camera. I stand up. I'm just going to push that base. I am also folding the binding in towards the center. This is going to help give it a nice stability. And there you go. You also may want to come along here and do a Tory squish along this edge to really make sure that we get a nice crisp right angle and that it sits flat. There you go. It was pretty quick. If I hadn't made this mistake, it would have been under half an hour to make the whole thing. So you've got your mesh pockets, you've got your elastic. You can always get pretty elastic too, I just don't have any. But yeah, there you go, guys. So happy sewing, and I will see you all for the next video.